This conference will now be recorded.
Okay.
Jeremy has arrived, so he's here too.
I think we have everyone here but Jody. Welcome, board, and however many other people are dialed in from the community to our first ever. We've got a sharing the screen here. This is first ever virtual board meeting. Janine, can you just go through exactly how we're going to handle public comments before? I'll just officially open it, then we'll do that. So, call to session, Board of Education meeting, March 16, 2020, Hastings on Hudson. Gavel. So, Janine, can you just go through how we're handling the public comments so people know, or how we've done that so far?
All right, I've received 4 comments from the public that I will read during the public comment period if the board would like me to do so. They're not very long, they all are on the same subject matter.
And just so that I'm clear and we're all clear, this line is only going to be open for the board members. We've received public comment already from some people, and further comment can be emailed to you, Janine, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And we will read those comments at the next Board of Ed meeting. Of course, anyone in the public listening, you can always email the Board of Ed, whenever you'd like, boe@hohschools.org. Okay, so with that, we'll get right into the meeting and kick it off with announcements from Dr. Henning Piedmont.
Valerie, you have to unmute yourself.
I sure do, Janine. Thank you.
Okay.
I was to start over. Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Sunheim, and to board trustees. And thank you for making it possible for us to continue to have this meeting. I know this is a challenge, and a number of districts that have happen to have a Monday evening meeting, and also the challenge of having to close their schools. So actually, most of our work, has been around managing, unfortunately, this pandemic and all of its intricacies. So I want to thank all of everyone for their involvement. I want to thank the Board of Education for being extremely involved and committed to making sure that we, most importantly, in this situation, we think about the individuals who are also, in a position where they did test positive and now, are worried about their health, and especially if those individuals were children. So the compassion that you've shown has really been remarkable and commendable. So I want to thank all the board trustees for that, and I want to thank our mayor, Nikki Amarmas. I always mispronounce it.
Armacost.
Armacost, yes, Armacost, for all of her collaboration and her her willingness to do anything to make sure that we're all on the same page about the work that we're doing to support our community, and obviously Chief Dosen and everyone in the community who's been deeply committed to helping us to manage this, and all the administrators and educators and teacher assistants and aides and everyone. So it's just been a team effort, and so I want to thank all of you for making this as I don't want to call it pleasant, but as achievable as possible given the circumstances. So thank you.
Right, Matt.
Do we have any administrative comments?
I have an update just around the preparations for an extended closure.
This is Melissa Szymanski speaking.
Thank you. So that's been a key area of focus for my work, and we've been working collaboratively with the HTA and also with the Professional Learning Committee, the administrators, the entire faculty, to create guidelines for the resources that are being uploaded to Google Classroom, and that is based on a memorandum of agreement. So I want to say thank you for that partnership. We've had surveys to determine training needs of members of the faculty around Google Classroom in partnership with the building administrators. We've ensured that all faculty members have received training and support to be able to have their Google Classrooms up and running very promptly. I do want to send some extra thanks to John DeCams over at Hillside for his leadership in supporting this work and actively facilitating training sessions. I've been working collaboratively with Laura Sullivan, Tesfa Stewart, Janice Mateo Toledo in her role as E&L coordinator, and the building leaders to ensure that Google Classroom resources are differentiated to reflect our broad range of learners while also maintaining student privacy. We have additionally reached out to some professional vendors such as Wilson to request permission to post resources that are typically restricted for posting due to copyright laws. So we've had some very good luck in having partnership, and I know that broadly people are understanding this situation and working to support students. I worked with the elementary and middle school building leaders to design a brief survey for families, so the families know that has come out already around Chromebook and internet access needs. And that list was compiled and shared with the business office. So Maureen Carballo and I have been working collaboratively along with Valerie Henning-Piedmont and thinking about devices and hotspots for families who need. So those were intended to be distributed already, but due to today's closure, it wasn't possible. So we will have a distribution at Hillside tomorrow, and there will be some additional details about the timing communicated via a district-wide blast. Last week, I worked with John DeCams and Chris Keogh to design a Google Classroom how-to page for parents. So that was sent as a blast to families, and Hastings High School and Farragut Middle School students have already, for the most part, been accessing Google Classroom pages. And what we'll do is we'll have some individualized codes for students who still need access, and those will be distributed within the next 24 hours, particularly to Hillside. Again, just to echo Dr. Henning-Piedmont, I'd like to thank our administrators and faculty for their tireless collaborative efforts to ensure that student learning is continuing. They've been working very hard and in a very united way to ensure that all students have assignments, materials, and resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Maureen, did you have anything to share? I know that you were going to.
Yes, I do. So again, it's just kind of on the same theme as Melissa, just kind of speaking about some of the efforts that we're doing during this time. In the event that we do have the extended school closing, we've been working closely with our food service company, Chartwells, as well as community organizations to ensure that our students that participate in our meal program and also for other families that may need some additional support during this time will be supported. The PTSA has offered their support by providing a grant to us for $2,000. They're also willing to support pizzas through local businesses. In addition to that, for families that may be in need, not only for families on the program, but for any family that we know could use some additional support. We're also coordinating with the Youth Council as well as Family to Family, and they're going to help provide, along with the PTSA, some additional gift cards to supplement what our food service program can do for our families. And anything that would be raised in excess of what we need will go back to the Hastings Food Pantry to continue to support those efforts. Our Chartwells will be in on Wednesday, and they're going to be working to provide and get bagged lunches and breakfast ready. We already have bags we're putting together with non-perishable food and snacks for families to also continue to support them during this difficult time. Our buildings and grounds crew has been in cleaning and sanitizing our facilities. They began that process again today. They will have the buildings ready and open for us for essential operations coming on Wednesday. And we really just want to again thank Joe and his amazing staff for all the work they do to keep us all safe and work tirelessly through this. It's a very tedious process. Our tech team is currently working remotely, but we'll be back in the building. Melissa had mentioned tomorrow there'll be a distribution of Chromebooks occurring at a time to be blasted later. and they will be back in the building once the buildings are able to be opened, which we believe is Wednesday. And they are on hand to both support any staff, students, and parents. We'll have their information out, and they can work remotely to help in any needs that may come up. And again, in preparation of our extended closure, the teams, how we've been processing payrolls and making sure that our business continuation plan is in place, and making sure that all the bills that are important in terms of all benefits and any type of utilities are paid and ready to go. But if in the event we were unable to access the building, we do have a plan in place as well. So just wanted to update the board on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. And yeah, I just want to, say to everyone here, Maureen, Valerie, Melissa, anyone else in the staff that's listening, thank you for really operating under, as we all know, very unprecedented circumstances, opportunities where we're having to take information in and make judgment calls that sometimes are changing every 15, 20 minutes, as well as a governance structure above us in the county and at the state level, who are trying to dynamically juggle in almost innumerable number of balls. And I think that what I've experienced working with this administrative group and the team, Mayor Armacost, Trustee Lopez as well, and Chief Dosen, is a group that is really dynamically willing, able, and competent to handle some of these challenges that are being thrown at us. And we've heard from a lot of community members on a variety of different topics. One in particular I want to point out is something that it was in a note that was sent out from Dr. Henning Piedmont today. I believe that note did go out, right, Valerie? That latest email, I believe, or Janine, you might know. It
went out today, yes.
Okay. And in that note, it did note that one of the things we want to acknowledge is there are a lot of parents in the district who aren't in jobs that they can just go to their home office or their extra bedroom and work for the next 2 or 3 weeks. They're either doctors or other essential workers, and they are put in a particularly challenging situation, and that Westchester County Executive Latimer acknowledges that, and that plans are being put in place to find ways to give them some relief and find children some safe and clean places to be able to be taken care of. And more plans will come out about that, I'm assuming, in the next a couple days. So stay tuned on that, but obviously an incredibly important point. And just to hammer home a term probably none of us heard about until 48, 20, 72 hours ago, social distancing. We do still see, I get social distance reports from around town. People email me a variety of places where they don't feel enough distance is being followed. Obviously, it's a free country. You can do what you want, but we do certainly suggest, and I think even in the last 24 hours, people have really woken up to the fact that it's not just getting together in 100 group crowds, but really just getting close to anyone does give you more of an opportunity to catch this, unfortunately, this virus. And so taking those requests seriously to give yourselves as much distance as possible will, it seems from reports coming out, really have a positive effect on being able to slow the growth of this virus. So please heed that as well. So with that, let's jump right into the meeting. We'll go over to public comment, and Janine Genauer will read the comments that we have so far.
Mark Sapphire, can you give us more insight how the Google Classroom will work? Many classes will require the kind of communication that only an interactive experience can provide. If all students in a class have access to webcams, will teachers be able to host web conferences? The technology is now free to schools through Google Meet. Okay, my next one is, one second. Leanne Winnick. Given the uncertainty and possible tremendous costs related to coronavirus, can we please put an emergency hold on bond funds approved in case they are needed for summer school, cleaning, remote learning, extra staffing, etc.? Please do not sign any new contracts on these projects. Thank you. Right. Now, these are from teams actually at Hillside. So I will read them. I don't know how they should be handled. So the kindergarten team wrote, the kindergarten team is writing to you to share our sentiments regarding Colette Smith as a teacher, as well as the Spanish program at Hillside. Although we did not have the pleasure of working with Colette, since kindergarten did not have Spanish this year, we were always impressed with how positive she is as a person. We constantly saw her zipping down our hallways with lots of materials on a cart prepped for the students that she is teaching. Speaking to teachers in other grades, we also heard that she was wonderful with the children, and the children were extremely engaged in learning Spanish with her. Kindergarten definitely sees the value of Spanish in the early elementary years. We believe that immersion at an early age does benefit children. We realize that this is a hard decision to make to cut Spanish from the elementary school, and we hope you consider all our thoughts before making this decision. Thank you for your time and consideration. The next one is from the Hillside 3rd and 4th grade teams. During this time, and it was sent to me by Phyllis Udice, during this time when underrepresented groups are a focus in our community, Colette Tutino Smith's FLES program shines a much needed light on learning about diverse groups in our world. The teaching she does, not only by teaching our young children Spanish, but the teaching of culture and geography is essential to our young learners. It helps to build a sense of community with other cultures. Although those ELL learners who are Spanish speakers in Hastings feel special and acknowledged through this program. We encourage you to keep the FLES program at Hillside. It is a valuable asset to our school. Then additional comments from Hillside colleagues were, FLES provides an invaluable service to the students in our classrooms. It embraces diversity, promotes inclusion, and makes children aware of the world we live in. Senora Smith's enthusiastic and inclusive approach resonates with the students. She comes to class 2 times a cycle, but students continue to apply her lessons throughout each day. As a colleague, Colette is flexible, receptive, and supportive. The loss of FLES and the excellent teaching that Colette delivers would be a great detriment to the district. And then there was a longer communication by Colette Smith. I can read part of it, but I will share it via email with the board. I'll just begin it. Again, it's regarding the FLES program. Good evening, my name is Colette Smith. I am the elementary foreign language teacher at Hillside. I am here tonight to speak on behalf of the FLES program as it was proposed to be cut from the budget for next year. I would like to start by saying that this program was one of the very first in Westchester to be started about 20 years ago, as I was told. Since its inception, it has been a model for other schools who also wanted to bring the FLES program to their students. Over the years, this program has endured many changes due to scheduling difficulties. The number of minutes allowed for it had to be decreased. Several years ago, the FLES department was downsized from 2 teachers to 1, and 2 years ago it became a cushion program because of the lack of classroom space at Hillside. Pardon me? You want me to continue or stop?
Yeah, I don't know what that was, but continue, please.
Okay. Throughout all these changes, the program has continued to be successful, and one thing has remained constant, and that is the love and support of this program from my students and colleagues. Every day when I walk into their classrooms with my rolling cart, I see their smiling faces. They welcome me with our hello song and excitedly ask me what will we be learning today. They love the songs, games, and interactive activities that we engage in to help them learn the Spanish language. My students share their excitement and proud expressions with me as they tell me about how they're using the language outside the classroom, whether it be on their recent trip to Mexico with their new friend from Ecuador or their Spanish-speaking babysitter or other members of the Hastings community they interact with. Even at such a young age, my students already see the value of this program and are eager to try out what they know with Spanish speakers who come into their lives. The letter continues. And then she just, towards the end, I'll say this part of it. This is their statement written in My colleagues in grades 1 through 4 have had the chance to experience FLES firsthand these past 2 years since it has become a push-in program, and they have thoughtfully included some words of support, which I will share with you now. This is their statement written in bullet form. We feel strongly about keeping the FLES program in place at Hillside. We believe our current program supports a variety of learners, some ELL learners, giving them an opportunity to shine while they're building confidence, language development, preparing them to be lifelong learners, vertically articulated curriculum, grades 1 through 12, early exposure builds on later success of developing a second language, students to become global citizens, multisensory instruction, our work with diversity. I want to thank my colleagues for their support in saving the FLES program, and I truly appreciate your time and thank you for your consideration of this matter. And so I left some of it out, but that was the bulk of the letter. And that's all the comments that I received.
Thank you, Janine. If anyone else, just to reiterate, has comments and they'd like to send them to us, we'll read them at the next board meeting. We will as well be receiving. Some of the comments may come in with regards to the coronavirus right now, and we are actively putting together a set of keeping an FAQ to make sure we're answering any questions that are coming up from the community. And so we will be getting regular updates out to the community on that topic. Okay, so moving along now to the budget presentation. I'll pass it over to Valerie and Maureen. I believe we're picking up on somewhere around slide 46. Is that correct?
Valerie, you need to unmute.
It's the technology slide.
Okay, there we
You
go.
know what number that is?
I believe it's 46.
Let's see here.
I have my slides up. It is 46. Doug is correct.
Okay, great. So I think as an overview, as Maureen, goes into this and has spent a tremendous amount of time, trying to make sure that, that she has a really good handle, and she does, on the inventory and all the things that are necessary in order for us to, to operate, to have the lights on, to be able to use any device and anywhere in the buildings, the 3 buildings, making sure there's access points for Wi-Fi, and that all the switches and different closets that operate, firewalls and so forth, are functioning and don't expire. And all of that is being done so that just to do business. And in doing so, as you look at this, I think this this pandemic illustrates how important it is for us to really stay on top of this, so that we can, in fact, have a way to sort of look down the road and build up to make sure that we have strong digital resources and the ability to access, to have our children and our educators and others to access the learning that's going on, and in similar fashion to how we've handled this board meeting and a meeting before this, which was also video, that is now more and more the way in which businesses operate, and how I think schools need to kind of take a page from that book and start incorporating it, so that we can in fact get through some of these situations, but also tap into ways in which I think students would really enjoy representing information that they learn, and kind of using that within a real life, authentic context. So I'll turn it over to Maureen as she describes how all these pieces fit into the big puzzle as we think about the budget from the last presentation with the budget managers, which we all understand about what 83% or 80 to 83% of the revenue that we need to operate the school system comes from our taxpayers. We levy that, and then another 10% comes from state aid, and another bit comes from our reimbursements from our participation in the BOCES programs. And that's about it. So the taxpayers bear the burden of this, of paying for the operation of and upkeep of these schools. So and when we have to present reductions, it's not something that we go into with any sense of of enjoyment, that it's a dread, but yet we have to close the budget and we have to put forth a balanced budget, and we have to close any gaps that we see. So that's just to connect this presentation to the last presentation, which was we sort of saw that as the theme. So Maureen will continue with the presentation of our technology budget, and as I said, she's really painted the big picture over the next few years, which we have to do, and included plans that help us to ease into the various expenditures over the course of the year. So thank you, Maureen, for all the work that you've been doing to make sure that operationally everything is in place, and that you've managed that very well. So thank you so much for your leadership.
Oh, no, thank you, Valerie. So yeah, so why don't, Janine, you're not, I'm going to flip to my screen, but you're not on slide 46. I think you're on slide 43. So I would bring it down to slide 46, which is the beginning of the technology.
Yeah, just click right there.
You're on special education unknowns. You're on, you have to go down to slide 46.
Yeah, I am. It's not, there we go. Okay,
There
I
it
picked
is.
it up.
Can you click on from current slide?
Excuse
All
me?
right, I may lose you. My only concern is if I go to slideshow and make it large, I don't know if I'm going to be able to find you again. I can try it. I mean, I can make
There you
it
go.
complete, but I'm
From current slide.
concerned.
From current slide. There you go. Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Okay, so this current slide really shows what we are budgeting for next year to continue to support our technology budget, which really, as Valerie had mentioned, is really the backbone of the school, and really in a time such as this really demonstrates the need of technology, and really it's as essential as lights. I think, if anything is down, it's kind of the building comes to a halt. So I'm going to first walk through what each of these categories means and what the funding there goes to. And then we're going to talk about our 5-year plan for technology, infrastructure upgrades that we're required to do based again on age and some of the thoughts behind it and how we're going to finance it and how we're going to plan to do it and why things were either prioritized over other things. And most of it is just based upon age and when there's no longer support on these items. So on the technology side here, the first line here, contractual services, again, this is just some small contractual services for both all of the printers and toner program in the district. And really, it is what it says there. That supports all the printing and toner replacement in the district year over year. And it's a contract we have with an outside company, and people can call in and they are either within 24 hours that those things are taken care of. The next big category there is our contractual computer hardware. This is really where we budget for purchase of our technology, all of our technology spending, whether it be end user devices, whether it be switches and infrastructure, endpoints, or all of those needs. And what is included in this line is that there are current IPAs, and IPA, the acronym there stands for Installment Purchase Agreement. And it's a way for schools, and many schools enter into these agreements. They finance their technology purchases. They're approved by the state of New York. They're done through BOCES, and in fact, they become eligible for aid. This is an example, like Valerie had mentioned, about purchasing things where we do drive aid back to the district the following year. So this line here, although it's an expense, we do in fact receive aid back in the way of revenue in the following year for these purchases. And it's a smart way to do things. We typically will make recommendations based upon what we're buying. If there's if the useful life of a device is 4 years, we'll typically finance that over 4 years. You certainly don't want to finance technology over a period longer than its useful life. So we'll speak to more in specifics about what in fact we're planning on purchasing next year, but we did have some active IPAs, which are installment purchase agreements from the last 3 years that there's some liability there. And this also reflects our recommendation of things that we need to IPA for next year to keep us up and keep us functional and to replace things that are in need of replacement. And again, some examples of these items are Chromebooks, iPads, smart boards, servers, storage, and switches, and things such as that. Contractual computer software, again, these are just instructional software applications. This, again, I put a note here. These items, again, this is something that when you spend the money, the state allots a certain amount of money per student that we budget right to that number. And basically, you spend the money, but you do, in fact, get the money back. It's part of the way the state allocates money toward instructional materials, and this is budgeted for the support of those softwares, and it will be reimbursed the following year. These are just kind of small supplies, so anytime there's a charging cable for a Chromebook or cables and things such as that, that there's a constant need to buy those kind of things, and miscellaneous smaller computer repairs such as a hard drive or a screen or something such as that, that would be fall under the supplies. And again, this is a district-wide line. This supports all the technology, smaller supply needs in the district. And then again, BOCES, this is our largest code here. This is our land support and maintenance agreement. It includes all of our internet cost and fiber cost. And this actually, we do the majority of our staffing. We do have some people who work directly for the district, but our network administrator currently, this cost here provides to us about 1.6 of FTEs of actual people. This is included in this amount. It also gives us all different levels of support back at the Regional Information Center, which is the BOCES, the local BOCES that supports technology. It has our data warehousing. This includes software licensing for our student management program, IEP Direct, all different things that are used to support programming across the district, including software for the athletics department and all things that you can imagine. These are, significant costs, but again, by doing these things through BOCES, and it also includes our test scoring, and that's only because that amount, because it's been in the BOCES service, has been kind of included in there for computer-based test scoring. So that's actually a function, of course, to support our education, but that's included in here as well. All of these items, by doing them through BOCES, we do in fact receive about 50% reimbursement on these amounts. So although significant in cost, we do in fact, a lot of our BOCES aid that is part of our revenues is driven by these costs here. So typically on the $1 million here, we would receive back about $500,000 or so the following year. So that's our total technology recommended budget for next year. And then we're going to kind of go into the kind of 5-year plan of replacement on our infrastructure and kind of give you some background on why those needs are, and I guess then we could take some questions. So basically, part of the technology planning is obviously we have inventories of all of our equipment. We also have, we know when different licensing and different things are in need of upgrades, and when end of life, especially on our critical infrastructure. I mean, the first and foremost thing that all districts focus on and ensure that is critically important is all your closets. And because if they're not functioning and your infrastructure and your back end isn't working, then it doesn't matter what kind of smart board you have on the wall. So we really always make sure and prioritize it and have that in mind when we're planning on what we can afford when we look at the dollars available. So you'll see next year there are 7 replacement switches that are supporting the closets at both the high school, middle school, and the MDF and IDF are just referring to the closet infrastructures at both buildings, and they are critical infrastructure. There's 7 switches that support the network that are in fact end of life, would not be continued to be supported, and again would not, this would be the typical time frame, and sometimes they even go a little bit beyond life, but these things were installed about 6 years ago. So the recommendation, first and foremost by the technology, our network administrator, and all people who are involved in it, when we looked at it, that's kind of critical infrastructure, and that's being recommended to be replaced. So the cost of those switches is about $60,000, and there is a labor cost in actually installing those. That is a combination of our own team, but you do need like a systems team. This is an example of a project. This is not just a typical everyday kind of technology project. This is a longer project, and it would take about a week's worth of work with the systems engineer team that come in and work together with our local team to ensure that that work is done correctly. Then we do have some small Cisco ICE upgrades next year to switch over on our identity servers. It just kind of helps manage and filter out the people who are on our wireless. And there's, again, that's an end of life item, and the replacement is about $6,500 there. And again, that recommendation is made just a bit, again, based upon an end of life situation. VoIP is our telephone system. Again, many times a lot of the costs in our technology system are to support our phone system. It is now, like most people, that's part of your technology spending because it really runs over our technology infrastructure. And again, there is a small piece next year that is the recommendation in working with our VoIP team to ensure that our phone system, which again is a critical system for the district. I can tell you when any phone is down, it's part of our emergency management team program. So again, critical and extremely important to ensure that all of our systems that support safety are always looked at first and foremost. This is a recommendation that is made by a VoIP team to kind of upgrade. It's an upgrade to our existing system, and it's a software upgrade just to ensure that the system is functioning. And it's always important to make those upgrades when they're required to ensure things are working correctly. Another huge piece of our technology spending is our security and our infrastructure around that. Over the course of many years, we've expanded, as most schools have done, expanded our video surveillance of our buildings. It really is so tied into all of our safety plans. And, luckily we have had many of these cameras that we're recommending replacement in the building. Some of them are close to about 8 to 10 years old. So looking at what we currently have and the functionality of those. Again, we don't only take into consideration age when we look at replacements. We really look at the help desk and we analyze the calls that come in. It's not so much as, oh, this is Maureen, we're going to throw it out. I mean, especially with cameras, you can have many cameras that can function for beyond a use video system, and it's actually fairly expansive at this point. So in order to ensure over the next 5 years, each year we are putting some money aside to ensure that that system is up and running well. We rely heavily on it. It is although we have wonderful security guards, they really cannot do their jobs with the amount of people in the facilities we have without this very important piece. And there are times some of these cameras that are being recommended are not, they're at the end of life. They don't always function well with the upgrades of softwares and things. They don't run as well on the system. They're slower. And again, this is, we need many cameras to be replaced. These are, again, they've served us well, but many of these cameras being recommended are 8 to 9 years old. So again, this is just a recommendation. We also are looking at possibly upgrading some of our access control panels on some of our doors. And there may be some swap out if we feel that we can live with some of those and upfront some of the cameras. So we'll have a final recommendation there. But right now, we are looking to update some of those access controls because again, there's some of them have been on the doors for over 6 or 7 years now, and some of them are in need of upgrade as well. And again, the labor to do this work is extremely expensive, and you'll see, and you can see right here where the labor is actually in excess of the actual materials. Replacing, again, we have a desktop replacement. We still have needs for desktops, both in the security areas and in various areas around the building. And there's a recommendation there for that, 15 desktop replacements. We have our iMac lab in the art for our high school students. That is really end of life. I think that system might be about 6 or 7 years old. It's used, it teaches like many, I think that's a mandatory class for freshmen. There's over 100 students that typically take that class. that is absolutely a critical, we got kind of through this year with that lab, but it's an absolute necessity if we want to continue to offer that class. It's 20 IMAX for that art lab, and they're about, I think, 8 years old, 7 or 8 years old. And again, our smart panels, I think everyone knows every classroom has them. You know, you install them, and there's just a constant replacement cost with these. This would allow us to replace anywhere between 8 and 10 panels. Again, we do not just replace panels if they're working well, regardless of the age. We've been extremely fortunate that all of our smart boards have lasted well beyond the acid likelihood of those things. So we really are very careful and very thoughtful when we're going to replace these. And it's really based on functionality. And we do look at the at all of the help desk reports to ensure that when we're making replacements that it's for things that really need to be replaced because they're quite expensive. So that would bring our next year total spend in the technology for purchasing at $214,000. And as I had mentioned before, and I'll show you at the end, what we have been doing is we take that amount and we typically look to spread it over a few years' time in financing with partnership with BOCES. And that's how we've done all of our technology, because much of these things, as I mentioned, have between a 4 to sometimes a 7 to 8 year useful life. So when we finance these purchases, we typically look to do something in the 4-year range, and I'll speak to that at the end. But this is the recommendation of what needs to be purchased next year with a, you know, and this was really developed and we went over this over months and months prior to making this recommendation. Can you, next slide, Janine? Thank you. Not to, you know, I won't go into maybe as great a detail in each one, but just to give you, again, a sense. So all of these things, much of the work that we did in the building, we were fortunate years ago, there were funding programs that came out of the state of New York, one of which was Excel funding, which allowed us to build a lot of our current closets at all the buildings. And that, you know, even back at that time, I think it was about $300,000 or $400,000 worth of work that went into putting that infrastructure in place. In addition, we also had Smart Schools bond funding a few years back that also helped us. So unfortunately, why we're seeing these large numbers now is because there's none of that funding is now coming out. I mean, and I don't believe, you know, in the state of where the state is, I don't think we'll be, I don't believe there will be anything like that coming out. So we were fortunate that when we initially did a lot of this work, a lot of it was given to us by those programs that existed at that time. So now we're kind of at a point where all of those things are now in need of replacement. And that's why you're going to see, similar to what we had to do this year, we're going to have some very, you know, significant, you know, replacements that were invested, you know, within the last 7 to 10 years. And back then, like I said, there were 400,000 or 500,000. So in modern day, you know, much of these amounts, it's very expensive infrastructure. So again, in the 21-22 school year, these again, end-of-life switches, another 8 replacement switches that will need to be replaced in the 21-22 school year based upon their end of life, based upon that they're not covered, they're not warranted. And if one of them goes down, it does in fact impact the functionality of all of our technology. We are, with the addition to Hillside, we need to add some new access points. Again, that's not a huge number, but with the anticipation that space will come online, we need to add 10 new access points to the existing system there. Another big spend we're going to have to do is our VoIP system. Again, that was put in 7 to 10 years ago, and it is end of life. We've done some upgrades, but at this point, the servers to support that system, all the licensing to run these systems, it is extremely expensive, although over the course of time, a lot less expensive way to have phones. But again, we're unfortunately at that point in time that we are in need to do a full upgrade to that. I think, you know, we're looking at, there are some phones that are newer. We won't have to replace all of them, but many of them, we have phones in every classroom. Again, it's very tied, like all schools, all to the kind of the security of the building. These are kind of critical pieces that I think schools now have, and they're tied to all of our safety plans and what we believe is, you know, necessary. So now having all the phones in all the classrooms and all the rooms, that's why that replacement number is so large. So again, that would be work that we would be looking to do in the summer. of July 21. And again, it would be a 21-22 budgeting year that we'd be looking to IPA this work. Video surveillance, again, same as what I spoke about before. Older system. Over the next 5 years, every piece of that system needs to be replaced, except for things maybe we've done the last few years. This is not even talking about an expansion. This is really just replacing existing and upgrading things that help us with our door intercoms, our access panels, and all the pieces to make that whole system function correctly. Desktop replacement, that's pretty much a standard number. Every year there's a certain amount of desktops that have to be replaced in the district, including in the cafeteria and different places where those are used to support the program there. Laptops, just as again, a number based upon the age. We do have some laptops in the district. We don't have a tremendous amount of them, but where they do exist, there is a need to replace those that are end of life. Many of them are over 5 years old, and this would be a replacement of a cart in the high school, or that's really used throughout the district for a variety of reasons. Now, Chromebooks, we have a one-to-one initiative, and again, this is just food for thought for the 21-22 school year. Smart Schools bond money will be finished in this 2021 school year, meaning that we had 5 years worth of funding to purchase and distribute one-to-one Chromebooks to all of our high school students. That funding is done. We will have no money left in that pot. If we want to continue with that program, which again, in times like this, it was actually great because it was like everyone had their device and we didn't have to worry about any children in the high school whatsoever. And this gives everyone kind of the same platform. But again, we do not have any more money left in that funding source. So if we were to continue with the board, and that was Valerie's recommendation, if we were to continue with that, at that time, we would have to purchase those devices. And again, the flat, you'll see the smarts board, that's a consistent number. We have them throughout the district. We need to replace 8 to 10 every year just to stay current on that inventory. Because again, many of them, we're only replacing things that are 7 and 8 years old. Next, please, Jean. Okay. This is a huge piece of our infrastructure, our wireless, our Cisco wireless, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a Cisco replacement, but we had a couple quotes done. We've brought in various vendors. These are all based upon a full analysis and a replacement of existing. So our wireless infrastructure, at this point, this is being scheduled for the 22-23 school year. At that point, the wireless that was in the district, I think it'll be either 7 or 8 years old. Again, we're talking about a few years out. That is, we can't, we got a very good useful life out of that. It's an extremely expensive investment. When we put it in, again, we did use Excel funding and some local funding to put that in. And it was actually, I think this is actually less, it's actually become a little bit better price-wise. I think we actually spent more when we initially invested in the system. But it is a huge dollar amount, and that does need to be done in the 22-23 school year. And we have, as the board knows, we have wireless throughout all of our buildings. Security, again, common theme. This is looking at our system and things that need to be addressed and spreading it over 5 years and doing it based upon the most critical needs. So we're going to continue to see dollars there. And I tried to push out things as far as I could, based upon, trying to come up with a funding plan for it. Desktops, Chromebooks, assuming not only a one-to-one initiative, but we have carts. So the middle school, every classroom has a Chromebook cart. Some of them were purchased brand new last year. Some of them were put together with Chromebooks we received back from a one-to-one initiative. Hillside also has Chromebook carts. This would be replacing Chromebook carts that are beyond 5, 6, and 7 years old. So we would probably have about 5 carts that would be in need of replacement in that year. We're not making any recommendation on any Chromebook cart replacement, just to put this in context, until that year. So we do have some older equipment, and we're hoping, again, we have so many technology needs that we are hoping to push off that purchase to the 22-23 school year. Again, that's about 38 to 40,000 on one-to-one Chromebook initiative for the high school, and the remainder being to replace the Chromebook carts that exist at both the elementary and middle school. And if we don't do a high school initiative, we would have to put some money in there because you would absolutely need to have some carts available because there's kids that aren't going to show up with something. So, you know, that's another conversation. But again, just to kind of ensure that we don't forget anything and everything is captured here. That's being recommended for that year. And again, the flat panels, by that point, I think based upon the age, we felt as though this particular year, we wouldn't need to replace as many because we had done some other purchasing and where we'll be at that time. So we would be recommending 30,000 that year. But again, looking at that total spend in that year for technology would be close to, $650,000. So it's significant. Next slide, Janine. Okay. And 23-24 school year budget. Again, these are the chassis and things that make our another critical piece of our infrastructure, very expensive infrastructure. These chassis were purchased, I think, with the Smart School bond money. This is a replacement of those. They'll be 6 years old at that point, or a little bit older possibly. This is what that infrastructure does cost. That is necessary infrastructure. It's end of life, $225,000 with a $40,000 labor cost. Continuation of upgrades and replacements of existing security system and all the doors that we also have our security system on, interior and exterior doors, and it's important to make those upgrades to make sure everything's functioning correctly, and our fire doors and everything that's tied into our system. Chromebooks, again, is just reflecting a one-to-one initiative and some replacements there. And again, flat panels. We were thinking at that time would be okay on our desktop. So those would be the only end user devices recommended for the 23-24 school year. Next slide, Janine, please. Okay, so 24-25, finally kind of at a place where all of our mandatory infrastructure is done. And at this point, the only thing larger purchases we would be looking at in that particular year would be, again, the video surveillance, some desktops, Chromebooks, and flat panels. But all the other closet work, VoIP, wireless, the larger kind of things that control our entire system would be upgraded at that point. And that particular year, we would have a lower spend. But if you see the total spend over that course, what I just kind of laid out to you, is well over $2 million. And I think that's, I think we talked about it earlier when, again, it's like anything that you continue to add, you do have to replace at one point. And, in combination of having some, there was a lot of money being pushed out by the state at one point to ensure that schools were investing, but like anything, you get grants and eventually you have to support it. So we're kind of at that point where all of the expense that some of which we did pay for in the past, or things that were purchased through either grants for the foundation and smart boards, eventually all that does become the district has to replace it. And as Valerie talked about with the budget, these are things that beyond, when we look at our entire budget and we think about our entire budget, not only for this year, these are things that we have to be thinking about. These are critical things. These are things that I can tell you that they're pushed off a little. So when you see them and you may say, can we push them off any further? Many of them are older. Many of them, like even BOCES, like, you actually, our technology team has done a good job. I think our teachers are very careful with how they use things. We're fortunate that our things are actually in fairly good shape and have served us well, but this is a real cost. And in order to have our infrastructure that supports everything we do, including the security of the building, this is the cost that it will take to replace that. And this took months and months and a lot of back and forth, but this is a real number. So the next slide is going to kind of go through how we plan on financing this. So as I spoke about before, the one tool, and every school uses it, for the most part, is the ability to finance over the course of either 36 to 60 months to purchase these items. So it basically, like I had mentioned earlier, if it was a Chromebook, you really don't want to do a 60-month purchase, but for other more expensive infrastructure kind of things, it would be more practical and typical to finance it over, the useful course of the life. So here on the first line, I just kind of laid out what our existing IPAs are. Again, this is the way we've always purchased items, and the board actually does approve these. They're put in front of you when we do these purchases, and these are existing obligations we have. You can see after this year, where some of those obligations over the, toward the latter, they start to fall off. So the first line is just our existing IPAs, which are really, thankfully not too significant, and it kind of lines up. It makes sense because much of some of the other work we've done through both with some of the state financing, but some of our local financing, now that those things are fully paid for, we're kind of at the replacement part. So our first purchase that we're recommending for next year, the first slide, which is reflective of our 2021 summer needs of things that need to be addressed, I'm recommending that we would issue a 250,000 IPA, that we would pay for that over 48 months, the first payment being next year. And there's a little bit of interest levied on it, but not much. And again, reminding everyone that we do in fact receive aid back, which is a great thing. So we are getting, in fact, about 50% back on much of these purchases that we're putting forth in the expense by the state. That is one way the state does help us with technology purchasing. So next year, our recommendation would be to add that IPA. The labor costs, unfortunately, are direct costs. They cannot be IPA'd. It's not legally allowable. So where you see the years that we have direct labor costs, those are things we do have to budget for and pay for in that budget year. So next year, you can see that although the IPA costs in financing that $250,000 investment, we will in fact have to budget for that $97,000 labor cost. These are all reflected in the budget that we put forth to you in our technology spending. We've already planned for that work to be completed. So that is year one. And then as we go down, you see where each year, based upon that particular year's needs of infrastructure and labor costs, how we're planning on paying for that. You can see the next year, 450. The recommendation is to do that over 60 months. We talked a lot about switches. All of them have 5-year warranties on them. This would be consistent. They'd be covered. It's the life use of that product. So these are recommendations to help us pay for those items. And similarly, the larger 550 and 400K, also as we issue those in those given years, we're recommending to finance those over the 5-year period. And the last one, again, being more end user device, we're recommending that to be paid over 3 years. So what does that mean, and how does that wrap up into our budget? And again, having to also factor in that there are significant labor costs with some of these projects and some of the work that have to be budgeted for. So you see that next year we're able to address our needs, and if you looked at the budget to budget, it was pretty consistent with our spend this year. So we didn't have a large increase in our 19-20 budget to our 2021. We're able to address those needs and things that absolutely have to be done this year, and the labor related to that, and be basically fairly flat in that. But where we see, we're going to have to be thinking as we develop our budgets and think about this year's budget and these needs. And that's why I think I really wanted to go over this with the board, because we have such a significant amount of infrastructure work in our technology that we need to do, just to be, thoughtful of, as we think about our next couple years budgets. These are things that we will in fact have to plan for the 21-22 year, and how we're planning on financing those items. I think although it's incrementally goes up, I think, the way we've tried to structure it was to, hopefully not, you'll see there's $100,000 uptick over for 21-22, but again, trying to manage those increases and those large, it's a $2 million over the course of this time investment, but from a budgetary perspective, it's 100,000 year over year, and then the following year would be 40,000. So trying to think about how that would fit into our tax cap spending, being thoughtful about how that looks. Unfortunately, the 21-22 school year, we do have to go up that 100,000, but then after that, the base is built in, and it'll just be kind of levying those additional funds. So, yes.
Quick question. Just for folks that might be wondering, can you just explain what an IPA is?
Yes, it's an acronym for Installment Purchase Agreement, and it is the way that many districts, that I'm aware of, it's an ability, and those are done in coordination with BOCES. They are approved by the state of New York, because in fact, like I had mentioned before, it also allows us to claim aid by doing that purchase through BOCES, does in fact allow for these technology purchases to be aidable, not the labor, because the labor is not aidable, but the actual items and the technology is. So that's the acronym there.
Hi, it's Janine. When board members ask questions, could you please state your name because people don't know who is asking the question?
I believe that was Jeremy.
Yes. Should we go on, or does anybody have anything else to say on the technology?
Well, I've got some stuff. Was this the last technology slide? This is Doug.
I believe so, yes. Janine, do you want to
Okay.
flip to the next one?
I just have a couple quick questions. In the first slide, there was, this year, 72,000 higher in BOCES.
Can you go back to the
it was
first
slide
slide,
46.
21, 22? 46. By 46.
Yeah, 46.
I don't
So-
see the numbers because I'm in full screen mode. Keep going back.
Keep going. To the bottom right should show 50, 49. Keep going. There you go. Keep going.
One more. That's it.
One more.
Oh, yeah,
One more.
that's it. So,
Yeah, there it is. Well, I'm just wondering, is that 72,000 change in line items, or is that an increase in cost?
okay, so remember in the beginning of the year, we spoke about getting that redundant line run?
Right.
So that's $45,000 a year additional expense.
Okay.
It's not
So that's
for-
45 of the 72.
Correct. And then the rest is just driven on like just increases in some of the costs.
Okay, got it. And just remind the board who helped put this together. Who kind of realizing we don't have a head of technology. We've got people who help us from BOCES. Was this the BOCES crew that helped us put this together? Or?
Well, so we have a committee and I'm on the committee. Our network specialist, who is assigned to us through BOCES, but really works for the district every day. Our account manager, and many of the people, when they do something like this technology planning, they have different lateral teams at BOCES that are on the network side, on the VoIP side, and on all the different teams. And really, how these things are being driven. And we also have our local people, Doug. We do have an assistant network specialist who does work for the district, and he's also involved and kind of in terms of creating the inventories. We have a very good inventory of items. And again, a lot of these switches, there's things, and this is as long as I've worked there's switches that run your system and they can't be 8 years old. Like that, there are certain things that are recommended. They're end of life, they're out of support, they run your critical functions. These are kind of known items that have been on the inventory. I would say the end user inventory, that's a little bit more where you have a little bit more flexibility because again, there's Chromebooks that are 6 years old, but they work fine. So we keep them and they're in carts and people use them. And then there's these kind of critical systems that we do rely on our partnership with BOCES. I think things like that, I don't think they're subjective. I think there's recommended replacements. When these systems were put in, we had them on the inventory with useful life. They're on your fixed assets for useful life. They're evaluated for functioning. And much of it is determined by like the end of use and the life of that and really the planned replacement because they're so expensive and they're critical infrastructure. But unlike a laptop that if you don't put it on for replacement and it breaks, you can easily plan for replacing it. These things you have to plan for and you have to be really thoughtful about it and use the resources at BOCES and and we do have partners, we have outside people who come in and do quotes and we get multiple people to kind of look at and do an analysis of the system and why the recommendations are what you see. So it's kind of a group effort, but in our partnership with BOCES, they really do work with partner vendors and all their teams there that are, that are supporting those critical systems. But a lot of it also is driven on end of life. We cannot have those parts warranted and nor are they covered. So that means if they fail, there's no replacement of them. And when that happens, and you have switches that are $10,000 and they're not covered anymore, but you're risking them going down and then needing to replace it and then potentially putting your system at risk for a few days. I think those are, that's not the way technology is planned for replacement. So The endpoints actually are
Yeah,
beyond.
one other thing, Maureen, one other
Yes.
thing, just before you leave that point. The audit, the technology audit also pointed out a number of these things. Is that correct?
Yes, that's true. So that's a good point, Valerie. So when you even have the technology audit, they really look at that. And that's just part of having a tight inventory and a tight replacement plan. I mean, that is something that they do look at. And when those switches are not correctly updated, they also make you vulnerable for cyber hacks, because they talked about that, having patches, having updated software, firmware, hardware. If those things aren't supported, that's actually part of your vulnerability in being potentially, subjected to
That's
hacks.
correct.
So those pieces are really critical. And again, it is done in collaboration with a lot of people who are, it's not, I mean, if somebody came in and said, you need 20 new smart boards because this is a better tech, it's not that, it's, again, everything being recommended, our end user devices are pretty much based on functionality. And then our critical systems are based upon what the recommendation would be on the industry standard as well. So as Valerie mentioned, it was also recommended by our technology audit, looked at our critical systems, and that's a big piece of a technology audit, is looking at your systems.
All right. Okay. Thanks, Maureen.
Sorry, my dog, when he was barking at me, so I had to mute for a second. All right.
Which slide would you like me to go to?
We can go to, if anyone has any other questions, I mean, at the end, you can always ask more questions on technology, or we can continue with transportation, whatever people would like.
Yeah, let's continue, and then we can ask it. We can keep asking.
Okay, so this one's extremely straightforward. What we hope it is. Currently, what we do know, we're planning on a slight increase in our out of district. This is a very, this one, occasionally we do see a change later in our budget process. Our out of district families have till April 1st to file an application for if they're planning on taking their children out of district. So this is really based upon the children we currently know, that I know of, that are currently out of district. And this, sometimes even with our own students, we may end up placing somebody out of district. So, we've been able to sort of manage it, and we do work with the Quad Village, which helps us build, like, we have some capacity there because we do share. But for next year, I just want to caution you that this is a conservative number. And if we have changes in that, we may have to come back and adjust this number up. But this is based on a contractual increase, that a CPI contractual increase. Our in-district contract, again, we were a little, this is really reflecting, again, a CPI increase, except that the current contract was a little bit below our budget number. That's why the $5,000, we're able just to increase it very slightly. I also just want to mention, in our contractual out of district, it also includes the cost of running the consortium, which we do with Ardsley, Irvington, and Dobbs Ferry. And we use one transportation supervisor and an office there. So we share that resource, and it's a great shared service, and we appreciate that partnership. But that cost is also embedded in that contractual number, as it's a contractual cost for us. And then just sports, as you can see, that part of it is just a reduction based on actuals. And also, if you remember, Jesse had made a recommendation to reduce some of the transportation for practices for both golf and, not golf, excuse me, ice hockey team. So the reduction there is reflective of a recommendation by our athletic director to reduce some of the practice transportation that we currently provide. So that brings our budget to budget increase for transportation at $32,000. You can go to the next slide, Janine. Again, this is I just want to remind people, this is, as we've been doing throughout, these are things that, although that's our number today, these are the unknowns. I mean, the good thing is that the price of gasoline currently, if anything is good, it's down, right? So, but what will the price of gasoline be in 15 months after the budget is adopted? We've seen this number double in the budget cycle. So we do pay for, and the reason I put that in there is that we do elect to pay for our gasoline directly, and that really helps us with our contracts, because out of district contractors don't have to bear that like that. It's more predictable for them. So when districts agree to pay the gas directly, it helps them they don't have to factor those kind of increases into contracts. So we do take on that fluctuation, but it actually does help us secure better contracts. But again, that's something we do have to be mindful of because we do pay that as a direct cost. What will our total number of students who need to be transported? And that means out of district. Again, I mentioned this earlier, the applications for parentally placed students aren't due to April 1st. I have, and a lot of times we will probably get a bunch in the next few weeks. I know few people have called me and indicated they'll be, filling out one, and then we get that list from Ardsley once they're all submitted. Any changes in other districts' numbers affect the amount Hastings will have to pay. So as an example of that, because we're in a quad, it benefits us, but if we currently share a bus, I'm just making it up, to Rockland Boces with Dobbs Ferry, for an example, and we're sharing the cost of that, if they decide not to place a student there next year, we bear the entire cost of that bus. That happens. It happens to us. It happens to them when we move students. But I don't know what their plans are. And there are times that my costs will go up $80,000 only because either they've decided not to send a child to a particular placement, or their child comes back to district, and then we're left to pay for that bus by ourselves. I mean, it happens. It's just part of it. So those are unknowns though to us because we don't even know our own, let alone what other districts are always doing. Again, one additional bus, out of district bus with a monitor, is in excess of $100,000. We've had that situation happen to us. It happened this year. Thankfully, we had a little capacity in the budget to handle that, and we did. But that's just one bus for one placement of a bus. We didn't have anybody going to that particular school. They couldn't route them with anybody else, and it added $100,000 to our budget this year. So just keep that in mind because again, transportation is one of these that we have very little control over out of district. Janine? Thank you. We went over the athletics, so you can go over this. Jesse presented this the last time, so we'll skip over this. And we'll skip over that. Melissa, did we talk about
Yes.
the sections?
We didn't talk about performing arts co-curricular. So the last time we had our Board of Education meeting, Gail proposed returning to a middle school play that combined 5th and 6th grade, as had been historical for the middle school. So that would result in a decrease to royalties, to costumes, to rentals. And additionally, I'm recommending a decrease to funding provided to Claudia Heitler, who comes in to work with 4th, 5th, and 6th graders around current events. So she would still be working with us around current events. It would just be a reduction. And instruction around current events continues to be a priority. It's also part of the New York State Social Studies framework that teachers teach to. So we'll plan to work with her and continue that for next year. And I'll be working in partnership with the 3 grade level coordinators of those grades and Claudia to determine how the work will look and how she can support teacher capacity.
Thank you, Melissa. So this here is just a summary, just to kind of keep track. Our administrators last time went through individually some of the recommendations they were making to help close some of the budget gap that we discussed. And some of these reductions are also driven by student needs. So some of the other reductions, although in total, we're grateful that some of them were just based on enrollment shifts where we were able to reduce some class sizes. As an example, the reduction of the 2nd grade cohort, as well as the reduction of the incoming 5th grade cohort, were really just based upon pure numbers of students. So those weren't necessarily, these would be recommended regardless of what the budget would be, because again, we had our numbers shrunk a bit in those 2 cohorts. So those are in there, but just to remind the board and the public of where we are in the process and what the current budget in front that is being presented to reflects. And these are the areas of reduction. The operations and maintenance department has reduced $65,000. The FLES program is currently being proposed to be reduced. And again, that would save about $140,000. 1st and 5th grade cohorts. Again, this is a function of enrollment, not necessarily driven on a budget, but they are, you know, we would be seeing reductions of both those grade levels. We, Gail had recommended a reduction of a 0.2 reading teacher, which can be, they have staffing to kind of keep that whole, but again, this is just based on scheduling and things, and a reduction in the 0.2 math coach position that's actually currently open. We do have a person retiring that was a planned not to be replaced, and that's that reduction of the clerk position there. Co-curricular, Melissa kind of went through the 5th and 6th grade, going back to what had existed up until a few years back, and Gail made that recommendation along with reducing the morning supervisor and pulling back on some of the other co-curriculars and some of the chaperoning at the middle school. And again, that would save approximately $20,000. A reduction, again, a shift in scheduling for how we use our security in the evening. Again, we had them kind of beyond the time we really need them. So making some changes there, we were able to save $5,000. Lou had made those recommendations on co-curriculars based upon looking at his total co-curriculars and the senior alternatives. Just to clarify, that program would still exist. It just would not be in the Schedule B. I think just to remind people, I think there was that was mentioned last time, but Lou, had suggested it just wouldn't be a Schedule B, but it would be run a little differently. And then these other kind of items, he walked the board through and why he's making those recommendations. So those are there, $23,000. Reducing some chaperoning at events, instead of having 3 and sometimes 4 people, either going where we can with 2 chaperones at various events and limiting some of the overnight events, or reducing some of the chaperones there to where they feel they can still correctly oversee the things. They feel they can make those that reduction of $3,500. Janine, can you go to the next, please? These are recommendations from the special ed. So again, being driven mostly by programming and student need. Again, not necessarily cuts to program, but driven on what is going to be operational. So Laura, in her programming for next year, has a reduction of 2 teacher assistants in the special ed department, as well as 2 teacher aides, just by changing some ratios, and again, based on program and student need. Jeanette had given us a recommendation based upon actuals and what they believe to support the OC Ed program, that they're able to reduce that budget line by about $40,000. Jesse is making a recommendation to reduce the ice hockey transportation to practices, and again, that's $6,000. And then again, Jesse had gone in and feels comfortable reducing some equipment, reconditioning expenses and supplies. And a lot of this is based upon, we've been able to invest a lot in our athletic program also in the last few years. And he felt comfortable that with that he was able to shave those down about $24,000. So what you see in our budget is a reflection of where we started and where we are today. We brought that budget down close to $1 million to get to be at the tax cap. Really, we're at the tax cap. We're a few thousand shy of it. So in going through that process and having some natural reductions coupled with everyone working together, we were able to, these all said and done, bring us to about $1 million in making sure our budget is tax cap compliant. Next one, Janine. Do you want to take this, Valerie?
Sure, absolutely. And we've reiterated these points before. I mean, the whole notion of state aid and the allocation is a moving target. And I think some of the board trustees who've accompanied me to some of the Westchester Putnam School Boards Association meetings, and so that we could hear about how all of that is constructed. But that still is an unknown, and a pretty significant unknown. As you know, state aid is about 10%, represents 10% of our budget. The actual final enrollment of incoming kindergartners, along with other K through 6 sections, is also fluid. So we certainly know who we have in our district. That's easy, but we don't always know who's moving in. We can certainly look at our trend data, which is the enrollment data that all districts receive when they're trying to make plans, long-term plans, with regards to whether it be when new equipment is needed, or, when it's time to consider, splitting classes. So that's important information, that we pay attention to. And that's, as I said, still something that's very fluid. It's fluid all the way up to August, actually. English is a new language. Learners, one or two additional students can make a big difference for us because they're similar to students with IEPs. They have very specialized needs. No one ENL child is the same as another ENL child, and it's all predicated upon, their needs are predicated upon basically their educational experience in their country of origin. So we have to be flexible, and our ENL, our TESOL teachers pay close attention to, making sure that they're providing the services so that the children can be successful in, as they acquire a stronger English fluency, but also the ability to do well academically. Special education classifications, some of them require more services and more staff. So while we try to meet the expectation of providing the least restrictive learning environment for our students with IEPs, that sometimes means that it may start with more staff, in classrooms, and especially if we're bringing children back from out of district placements. There is a transition period. So Ross, Sullivan, and Tesfa Stewart are very much paying attention to that and making sure that, we do serve the needs of children. We do honor the IEPs, but our budgets have to be fluid when it comes to ensuring that when, we receive, if a new student with an IEP comes in, we have to service them. And that may, depending on their classification, lead to an increase in the budget. Additional bus expenses. So if we have an out of district placement, that may not be on the current route that other children are on, who may be going to the career and technical education program at Southern Westchester BOCES. That route could cost additional money, anywhere from, I would imagine, $25,000 higher. So that's an additional expense that we don't always know whether or not we're going to see that. And unexpected leave replacements. If an educator needs to go out for specific reasons that are outlined in the collective bargaining agreement, we have to honor those, and we have to replace them. And obviously, we look to replace them with an employee who costs less, because obviously we're not going to bring the person in at the same cost as our current employee. So, but we don't always know when those leaves are going to occur. And then finally, loss of tuition related revenues. So if a child, who's coming to our district, or who's in our district from another school district, who's a special education or student with an IEP, if that child leaves, and we've sort of been planning for that revenue from that tuition, there's really nothing we can do about that. So, we certainly, do our best to, I know that Laura Sullivan and Tesfa Stewart do their best to keep children, who are brought in from other districts as a form of tuition, in environments where they can be successful, but sometimes it doesn't always work. And sometimes it's a matter of potentially the family deciding to move, but that's another form of revenue that's very fluid.
Valerie, I just wanted to jump in terms of just revenues, because I was, we'll have to talk about it at a later meeting, but, everything that's going on now is going to have a significant effect on next year's budget. And I am going to have to go back and kind of look at our revenue projections, because just the cut to the Fed interest rate that happened this week, that's going to change my revenue projection for next year to the tune of about $100,000 reduction in revenue that is not reflected. So that would be another $100,000 gap that we're going to have. The sales tax revenues, I've already gotten emails, sales tax collection is now down. So we were, kind of budgeting off a very, very strong number that we've been seeing in the last year or so. But I think it doesn't take, I think anyone that's just following anything that's going on, I think those two alone, factored with also what's going to happen with the state budget, are they really, with their loss of revenues and monies that they have to use out of their reserve funds to either do things with hospitals and things the governor spoke about today. What's the likelihood? I mean, the state, and as you know it, if they don't have money, they can just say, we're giving you less. And even if the formula is still running, it happened for 7 years. They just take it back. They just say, we can't give it to you. So, I mean, that's one of the really things that even beyond what we've talked about, that's another whole thing that has been introduced in this last week. It will have a budget implication. We will have to go back and adjust the budget because there's just not, this year I'm already losing my estimated appropriated fund balance for the end of the year was anticipating a 1.25 or 1.3 interest rate that we've been making. And just that change alone will be about $25,000 lost revenue in this year. So, I mean, the real numbers, we're probably going to lose about 100 this year and close to a couple 100,000 next year. The budget as it stands cannot, it doesn't have and the revenues have to be adjusted to reflect that. We can't make up that shortage. We just can't. So as we're deliberating this budget, I think it's going to require us to look at that. Those two, I mean, hopefully the state can, give us the money that they promised to us, but that is something that by the time this budget is shown again, has to be adjusted because the money's not going to be there.
And we talked about this at the first budget presentation. I think that was the opening statement, which is, it'll increasingly become, an impossible task to close a budget gap when we don't have, increases in revenue and not necessarily increases in state aid. So we are, we're balancing the budget on the levy, the taxes that we collect from our community. And the board is going to have to consider, as we had talked about at our earlier board meeting, March 2nd board meeting, have to consider how do we begin to structure, a 5-year budget planning where we actually see, how much above the levy would our community be willing to go, just so that we don't, in turn, as a strategy, have to then continue to cut. So that page of reductions that Maureen showed is going to be our future, from here on out, if we don't find a way, a different strategy of, of making sure that our community knows what's at stake with regards to, just rolling over from one year to the next, with all of the contracts, and there's every contract, whether it's a contract for transportation or it's an employee contract. Those are built-in increases, and we have to honor those. And just the cost of doing business, results in a budget gap from year to year. So I look forward to, Maureen and I look forward to continuing to have conversations with the board and actually start, having more, more sort of system-wide or community-wide conversations about, what this particular budget illustrates and serves as a harbinger for the, for coming years if we don't, start really thinking about, we can't keep closing the gap by, reducing the budget, reducing programs, reducing services.
Absolutely. And again, just say it's going to make, and we're not alone in this. Every district, I mean, I talked to my colleagues today. We're all thinking of, we were already all thinking about that prior to kind of what the current events are, because there has to be a strategy in place. Some districts have, looked at it and say, what do we increase the levy each year, although over the tax cap to kind of to build in that sustainability. Because I think there are things like if you could add in 300,000 or 400,000 over the tax cap and not make those cuts, that does build into your base and then doesn't create those shortfalls that you will end up building up into. It'll just continue to, it helps offset that a bit. So I think we'll be, I think that's important that we really, as we look at our March 30th meeting, in anticipation for that, I think there needs to be some, there needs to be some discussion around that. And again, we do need to kind of go back and understand what the what the current things that we're dealing with, what that effect will have on our current year budget as well as next year, because it's a real concern for me, and we don't have capacity in our budget, as we've been talking about all along, to to just take those type of losses. So to be continued.
Thank you, Maureen.
Welcome.
Thank you, Maureen and Valerie. It sounds like there's going to be, some probably material differences when we see this next in 2 weeks, given the revenue and, some of the other stuff you were talking about. So I imagine some of these questions that come up will might change or evolve. But let me just pass it out to the board members. Any questions right now?
Yeah, thank you, Maureen and Valerie. Look, I recognize the challenges in putting this together. I certainly appreciate all the work that people have done to create the cuts that they've cut. I'm gonna just state my preference of figuring out a way, notwithstanding the challenges that are going to come with reduced revenue that we'll figure out over the next couple of weeks, but figuring out a way to maintain 5th and 6th grade plays and figuring out a way to maintain Claudia Heitler. I think these are both relatively small dollar small dollar items that I'd like to see some creativity around other line items, at least be given a choice as to, for the board, you could either cut A, you could cut B, or you could cut C, display and Claudia Heitler. I understand that they're both small, but I consider them to be quality of life issues. Again, my personal opinion, so that's what I'd like to see. I guess one final question for Melissa, just around the math coach and the reading specialist and the 0.2 reductions. Just where, I guess, academically, from a curriculum standpoint, are those two positions made up for students?
So one of the things, I mean, it's always a moving target in terms of our MTSS process and who is in need of tiered support. One of the things that we need to be thinking about is, again, around building capacity in the area, particularly for differentiation. So the professional learning work with Tracy Tyler that's been happening at the middle school, working on, I can speak to mathematics specifically in terms of partnering with Greg Stevens around an action plan in mathematics and thinking about all of the components around curriculum, instruction, assessment, professional learning, and the learning environment that we can find some opportunities to strengthen programmatically and also to be thinking about how we can support teachers to support students. So in terms of where we are, you know, when it comes to children, again, my philosophy on that is that children should not have intervention as a very long-term, multi-year process, that ideally we're working and triangulating different forms of data. We're thinking systematically and how all of these different pieces interplay so that we can have the students who need the support receive the support and then come out of the support. And so so there's the differentiation piece too. We are very fortunate to have very strong teachers, and we have very willing teachers, and we have very unified teachers who are good collaborators and very, very committed to student learning. That said, of course, with anything else that's related to student need, there are some moving targets and we don't necessarily know. We can predict who will be in need of intervention, but we can't always say that with 100% certainty.
So
We can
I just
also
try to
could I add another part of that? We also discovered in complying to a New York State mandate to make sure that special educators held another license if they were teaching, let's say, math, science, or social studies. So we in reviewing those certifications in preparation to comply with this mandate on July, that goes into effect July 1st of this year, we discovered that we had special educators who had literacy certifications. So they had not been utilized in that manner before. So reducing the literacy coach position at the middle school was made up and actually increased as a result of needing to ensure that our special educators were also being utilized to work with potentially their own, the students that they also serve by providing reading instruction. In terms of just, sort of balance across the three schools or between the two schools, Hillside has a 0.8 math interventionist and would love to have a full-time, a 1.0 interventionist. So we felt that, having 0.8 at each, for, the elementary and the middle school would at least be equitable, because everyone certainly, could, more than find more time. But as Melissa said, we also are really restructuring our MTSS plan so that, children don't, stay in these interventions for life, for the duration of their time as students, but that we really work on, other forms of support for teachers to build their capacity and their sense of efficacy, to work with, lots of different types of learners.
Okay, so just to, I guess maybe to paraphrase and combine, ignoring the equity piece of 0.8, but just to paraphrase and combine both Valerie and Melissa's point, the 0.2 reduction in these individual professionals is made up by both fully utilizing current staff that have these certifications in special education as well as content area, and also working with kind of the, I guess the way I describe it, Melissa, is that K through 12 sort of vertical alignment, working with department heads to say, okay, where are the kids in need, and targeting services to those children from the existing staff. And your thought is professionally that's making up as much or more of the academic supports that they would otherwise get with these 0.2s.
Right, and I think, again, strategically, it's important that we look systemically. So what are all of the different moving pieces that provide us with some opportunities to make sure that we are strengthening where we can, and we're being very specific in targeting individual student needs.
Great. All right, thanks a lot.
This is Allison. I just wanted to ask what you were thinking, Melissa, when you talked about reducing current events. What would that look like?
Sure. I think, just broadly, one of the themes that I'm thinking about is around building teacher capacity. So right now, and she will continue to be a fabulous resource, and current events will need to continue to be a priority. Right now, Claudia Heitler is doing the direct facilitation in terms of working directly with children. And so I believe that we have an opportunity to work with her and work with the team coordinators to think how she can help to also build the capacity of the teachers, so that current events, which again does fall under that social studies framework umbrella, that teachers are supported and they have some opportunities to learn from her around how to then bolster their facilitation as well. I think that completely eliminating her from the work that's happening in the buildings would not be a good move. I think that working with her and utilizing her strengths and her areas of expertise to help support teachers to build their capacity is an option for us to consider that I'm recommending.
Yeah, I would just reiterate that she is one, that program is one of the ones that I do hear kids coming home and talking about regularly. So there is something going on there that might be a bit intangible, but I appreciate that she can also help train teachers. But I'm glad that she'll also remain in the classroom for now. I do think there is something special there that kids really relate to and are excited by.
Agreed. Yeah, there's no doubt that she's wonderful. I've actually had the opportunity to sit with her on more than one occasion and then talk about the program and talk about how she goes about looking at resources. And I've actually learned a lot from her in terms of her process and what she's bringing to the table. And again, I also think that working in partnership with the teachers and building their capacity is another thing for us to be considering as well.
And I just wanted to say too, I hear all those teachers who were talking about FLES and not wanting to cut that program. And all of us wish that we didn't need to eliminate a lot of these items as well. I wonder if they gave voice to anything else they would cut besides that.
Well, Amy and John spent a lot of time, as did the other budget managers, looking very strategically at their budget lines and programs and services, and taking into account feedback that they've heard over time from parents, community members, and just their own understanding of what what the program brought, and then what it is that that perhaps it wasn't able to do because of the short time that children were actually exposed to the language. I mean, out of a twice out of a 6-day cycle is not flex, it is flex, and I think Amy and John explained that. So
I'm sorry, I didn't say my question well. I guess I meant, did the teachers propose anything else to counterbalance? Because I understood Amy and John very clearly about the limitations of the program in terms of how often it met, and a lot of the feedback we'd received. But I wondered if did the teachers ever weigh in and say, oh, these other programs, no.
We weren't present when Amy and John met with various people in the building, but I do know that each budget manager was diligent and thoughtful in the decisions that they put forth, and none of those were easy. But you see you see how wide the gap is. So something has to come out. I mean, and I think everybody can advocate for something that they value, because they're right, they are valuable. Everything that we pulled out is valuable, but where are we going to get almost $1 million from? They're not, unless we have like amazing benefactor somewhere who might want to give us this money, and then we still have to maintain it. So if we don't get it again, as I said, that rollover every year, with all of our different kinds of contracts, is a net, that's our destiny. That's any system's destiny, that those are costs that you have to face year over year.
That's just, I guess, what I want to highlight for people listening is, with everything that we want to include, that means something else has to come out. So we do want to keep everything. And that therein lies the rub with this. So I just wanted to highlight that if we put in that 140, it has to come out somewhere else.
Exactly.
And I just wanted to, I know last year it was a different budget year, because at that time you had room under the tax cap. We had actually a very high, significantly high tax cap last year. And unfortunately, meaning the last budget cycle, when the FLES was also on the table. But unlike last year, you just said it, Allison, but this year it would require something else to come out. Last year, you were able to just add it back without touching anything else. That's not the case. Every year is different. Things change, needs change. As we've laid out a few times, kids come into the system, kids' needs change, buses change, things, that needed to be accounted for. And then with, a variety of other kind of things that drive costs, the TRS, we had a significant increase in our pension costs this year. Last year we had a decrease, meaning this current budget. Last year the state decreased the rates there. This year they went in the opposite direction. That swing alone was $400,000. So these are things that, year over year, when things like that happen, there's no money to make up those shortfalls. And to Valerie's point, everything does have a value. The budget managers, well, everything that you see, including the technology, these things take, 5 months. Months and months and months of planning and conversations before they're put forth. So, but unfortunately, we do not have any capacity. If anything, we're potentially going to have more financial difficulties. So that's just to kind of, it's not the same. I just wanted, because last year people may think it may be just coming and we could add it back. We're at the tax cap max, with the possibility of needing to potentially reduce more, just based upon other revenue shortages. So not to be doomsday, but that's just the reality.
Yeah.
So I'd love to, unless someone else has another comment, realizing that we may be having some very different conversations in 2 weeks if, as this current set of facts evolve. I'd love to keep moving. Are
Yeah,
there
one
any
more broad,
comments?
yep. Yeah, one broad question for Maureen. Generally, we've talked a little bit about the revenue issues that are now, readily obvious with the Fed rate cuts. Have you begun to think at all about implications of a long-term closure and what that does in terms of both revenues but also spend? Do we have any, I don't know how maybe you talk a little bit about the busing contracts, if the buses aren't rolling for the balance of the year, any food service items, if food's not coming in, or these contracts that are pay as you go. So just a little bit of some very first level thoughts on the effect of what's happening.
Yeah, so the only place, so our bus contracts, of course, when there's certain times of the year when we are closed, like our normal closures, those are factored in when they do it. So different breaks and things we don't pay. These type of items in contracts, and this is consistent with all districts, we're gonna have to pay them is the long and short of it. We're gonna have to pay for either 17 or 18 days worth of service for all of our bus companies regardless, because all the bus carriers now are, which is a fairly new in the last few years, they're all unionized and their workers are similar to ours, are required to be paid when they're closed. So those bills don't go away. Our cafeteria is a self-operational program, which is the same in all schools, and that is not included anywhere in the general fund budget. If anything, though, this actually this type of closure, although we're going to be providing meals, will actually result in we'll be seeing losses in that fund this year because we're not going to be making sales, but we'll still need to have staff in to create these meals for students. Will actually be a cost with zero revenues coming into offset. So that's actually going to hurt the lunch fund, which I'm not going to get too much into it, but it's important for that program to make money because there's costs associated with that program that they're able to cover within that program that if not, we would have to cover out of the general fund. So right now, the only place where we would not be spending money would be on our substitute teachers, things like that, like our, obviously we're not going to have substitutes that we spend probably a few $1,000s per pay cycle on that. So if we were closed, possibly save a few $1,000s there. Our part-time teacher monitors, they don't operate under a contract. We have about 16 or 18, I think it's somewhere between 16 and 18 currently employed. They would not get paid, so that would be money we wouldn't be spending during this closure. But those type of reductions really will not offset some of the losses we anticipate. Because again, the majority of those larger costs are still going to be expenses we're going to have to bear.
And in addition, in terms of this, dealing with, mitigating, the, presence of the virus, I mean, all the additional cleaning and staff that's needed to do that is also an unexpected expense.
Yeah. So to Valerie's point, thank you, Valerie, for reminding me that. Just in fact, like the last week's extra cleaning, I think was like $4,000 or $5,000 of overtime just to do that in 1 week. The cleaning supplies, I know Joe has indicated to me, we actually have to sit down and we're gonna have to do some budget transfers because he anticipates just our spend, we might be 20,000 up on supplies just for this, the amount of paper, just the things we added hand sanitizers all over. So there was a run on cleaning products similar to the run on toilet paper we're seeing in supermarkets, but seriously, everyone was scrambling, still scrambling. This is not over. And the cost alone, I know in just paper goods, we saw like maybe we did like 5 times the amount of paper towels in 1 week than we typically do just because of the hand washing. So significant. I methat's significant when you have 20, over 2,000 people in your building every day. That's a significant amount of products that are used. So to Valerie's point, this plus the additional cleaning that's going to be necessary before we open again, we're going to need to bring in the whole team again and probably, if it's going to cost us overtime and any time that we have any type of issue reported to us. So this whole event could potentially be somewhere in the $50,000 range between now and the end of the year, additional costs just in the custodial unit.
Yeah, okay, all right, thank you.
It's all negative, unfortunately. It's no good news, you know?
This is Allison again. One last thought. I wonder if some of the principals have thought about reaching out to HEF or the PTSA to fund like the middle school play for 5th and 6th to keep those divided. If that becomes a line item that's really important to people, maybe HEF would be interested in supporting that, or another community organization.
Well, last year, I mean, I think you're right, Allison, but I think that we have to look at it at a district-wide perspective, I guess. If there's things, I think that's what we did last year. When we did reach out to them, it was a combination of everybody sitting down because they only have so much money. So that recommendation really would come from a group effort. I mean, I don't know if Val, you want to speak to it, but that's how we did it in the past. When we did look outside, we know they have limited funds, so we would really, only tap them for things that we know from a district-wide perspective. It has to, include all the things that, as we go through this process, and where we end up, where the needs really are the most critical.
Right.
So that's kind of what we did last year, and they did support, Allison, they did the ARC for Kids last year, and they did actually support some of Claudia's work this year as well. But again, I know that's something that, and they did also the salsa program this year as well. So if we wanted to continue with those programs or even the salsa, that would require them to continue to support some of that, or else we'd be looking to cut that too. So those are conversations that will have to happen once we know where we are in its entirety, the entire budget, and before that would even be, before they'd be reached out to.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay. Well, we'll look forward. I don't know if that's the right term, but we will have another discussion about this in 2 weeks. And hopefully we'll have some not too many painful decisions to make at that point. Thank you for all your work on this, Maureen and Valerie and Melissa, and obviously all the budget managers as well. Okay, so I want to move on to the business items. And there's 3 sections here. There's the public content, the business items, there's executive content, and then there's also an addendum, which I was looking in the wrong place, so I'm just going through that now, for a side letter.
I just want to point out that it was removed from the agenda as number 11, and then we re-added it. So when I added it back, because the agenda was live on Friday, I added it as a business addendum. Because it was there, it was removed, and then it was added back.
Okay. So for the business items under 4A, do any board members have any comments or questions? Okay. And any questions under? Okay, so no questions under. Just want to make sure. I'm just looking at this. I want to make sure all the numbers are right on this, so that we're voting on the right thing. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 removed from agenda. 11 is listed in executive content below, but it's placed in 4B as number.
It shouldn't be an executive content. It should just be as 4B.
All right, so we just need under 4A executive content, 11 that should just be removed. So it's just kind of confusing. Do you see that?
I can't see it. I can't see executive content when I'm in the screen, but I understand what you're saying because I know it was set up that way.
Yeah, so it's just kind of listed in 3 different places. So let's just say items 1 through 10 and 12 and 13 on 4A. Do I have a motion to approve those items?
So
Who was that?
That was
Lauren.
Jeremy.
Who
Okay.
moved?
So Jeremy moved, and do I have a second?
I'll second. Lauren.
Okay.
That's Lauren.
Yes.
Okay. All in favor, if we could just go along and say aye or nay. So I'll start aye.
Lauren, I.
Allison, I.
Jeremy,
Tim?
aye.
Sylvia, I.
Tim, I.
Okay.
Okay. For the next one, I can actually see everybody's picture. So if everyone just holds up their hands to vote, I'll be able to see it.
Okay.
So we don't have to do a roll call vote. I'll be able to
Okay.
see everybody since everybody has a visual picture of themselves.
Okay. So 4B is a side letter agreement with the teachers union, given the training for distance learning. Is there anything else to say about that, Valerie, that we should know about?
Sure, absolutely. I want to thank Nate Morgan for working so collaboratively to make this possible. As you know, it's a very short timeline. You know, the conversation on Friday, changed very dramatically when we had to shift gears because of, new information about, a circumstance and of one of our students. So what the side letter basically represents is the ability for us to, in our system, have a common understanding of what we mean by, providing, continuous instruction, via distance learning. So that term, distance learning, has some different meanings in different environments, but for the purposes of Hastings, this is what we're saying, what we're doing when we use the term distance learning. So basically, teachers, even today, we're working either together collaboratively or with their school administrator to upload materials, assignments, and resources to the Google Classroom page that was created either collaboratively by grade level or team, or individually by teachers in different content areas. Those materials are up, and teachers are basically prepared to provide information to teachers tomorrow, to parents tomorrow of younger children who are not, current users of Google Classroom, to help them navigate the class roster. The teachers will be posting their office hours. There are a minimum of 2 hours that teachers will be corresponding with children or with parents with regards to any assignments, materials, or resources present. We want to make sure we limit the work assigned to students so that this has become this overwhelming task. And then avoid, we've asked teachers, and they're complying, to avoid assignments greater than 30 minutes in length per grade, per teacher, per subject. To make sure the assignments that they do upload are open-ended, and are due over time, and connected to face-to-face instruction, rather than them being kind of just, very specific one-day assignments, but sort of continuous and evolving. Teachers won't assess or any formal assessment or any exams during this time that we're offering this distance learning or continuous learning via Google Classroom. Assignments will be modified, resources and instructions. So our special educators will be working closely with students as well as those students who receive services under Section 504, and our TESOL teachers who work with our English as a new language learners. Our educators will certainly be on top of any updates that are coming their way, whether it's something coming from the district office or from their principal or their team members. Our educators will communicate with our students and our parents during those posted hours. So each teacher will have different office hours between within the framework of their current workday. Those will be posted on Google Classroom. You should expect to see that up, most of that tomorrow, but the actual distance learning work won't start until Wednesday, and that's official start time across the district in the region. Obviously, the district will monitor the use of technology for educational accountability. So if we did, in fact, I want to thank Maureen and Melissa, and tomorrow, Amy and John, and Melissa for, and Christian Padul, who's our network specialist from the Lower Hudson region, for helping us to provide Chromebooks to students at Hillside. There are about, I believe, 90 students who needed a Chromebook. If that's correct, Maureen?
That's correct, Val.
And so that required, making sure that those resources are, inventoried and that we can distribute them to parents tomorrow, and also, assist any student who might be, new to Google and, might need a little help. So we're providing that. And we also wanted to assure in this this site letter that this distance learning work won't be part of the APPR evaluation system. We also mentioned that, if teachers have to participate in a CSE or an annual review, which has to continue, and while the letter that was distributed today, collaboratively developed with the other superintendents in the river towns, the March 31st date may not be the last, may not be the end of the extended, closing. So we want to make sure that, CSE meetings and annual reviews, all of those continue and can continue using similar technology that we're using for this board meeting. Laura Sullivan and TESPA Stewart will be working with teachers. And so if they need teachers to participate in CSEs or annual reviews, those teachers then will take those 2 hours of office time on that particular day and be a part of a CSE or an annual review meeting. And I want to thank Nate for, making sure that that language was incorporated into the MOA because it was very, very important for us to be able to comply with, expectations of, those very important tasks at the end of the year associated with ensuring that children with IEPs, their services are reviewed and that adjustments are made accordingly. And we need our educators and special educators involved in that process. It's very, very valuable. So that's the basics of this MOA. Again, I want to thank Nate Morgan and for working really collaboratively and in service and interest to all of our students and all of our staff, all of our educators. So thank you.
I have a couple of questions about the 2 hours office hours or 2 hours per day.
Yeah.
What are they doing the rest of the day? Are they there's no teaching kind of a group class, or there's no sort of, are we saying that they're only going to be spending 2 hours a day reaching out to students or are available? And then if there's a CSE meeting, then it's less than 2 hours? Because the work day is longer than 2 hours. I'm not sure how we will kind of fell on that number.
Well, all of this is uncharted territory, Jeremy. I mean, and literally this MOA didn't exist until we had this pandemic. So, we're all trying to kind of work within frameworks that exist and also honoring contracts and not, locking horns on various things. This is consistent with what other districts are doing, who use the council of the guidance of their council to work closely, with this collective bargaining unit, our teachers association, to construct a framework that didn't exist before. And if there's no language in a contract, to change the work conditions of teachers, we have to respect the contract. We can bargain.
I get it, and I get that it's contract. I'm just wondering, so just so I understand, so teachers are on the hook for 2 hours a day and that's it? Or are they, is there more?
Jeremy, let me just say one thing.
I'm just trying to
Valerie,
understand.
let me say one thing,
how this is
which
gonna
is that, Jeremy, teachers are also, quote, on the hook for figuring out how to put up curriculum in an entirely new dynamic that's sequenced for all of the students in their classroom. So people that have an entire plan set are now looking and rewriting their plans, posting them, and figuring out how they're going to reformat curriculum in an electronic way. So they're quite on the hook for a lot.
I don't mean any disrespect on it. I don't want you to take it that way. I'm just trying to understand how this
Too late.
looks, because I'm just trying to understand. So there's the time that goes into figuring out what goes up on, because I think a lot of other people in town are going to try to understand how this e-learning works, right? So there's the time that they spend putting the lesson plans together, and then in addition to that, there's 2 hours dedicated to reaching out to students. Is that how this?
Well, they've already uploaded, resources, materials, assignments that are consistent with what they're doing. The information is current and up to date. They're not required because, again, there's no language in that would lead any teacher to have to replicate what happens during the course of their regular day. What's developed here is consistent with what other districts are doing. Some districts may be doing something different, but I can tell you there's not a single district that has a teacher at home teaching the whole day. There is some specified time because we don't really even know what these days are going to be called by New York State. So we do have to, use guidance and not sort of look at, how differently this is or how less, what less, what diminished amount of time this is as opposed to others. It's not, the two things are not even the same. And teachers did spend time, some of them, were more familiar with Google Classroom, some weren't. They spent a lot of time, trying to make sure they put quality materials in Google Classrooms that children can, interact with and access. And the minimum of 2 hours of time is spent corresponding with children or their parents if they're younger children. So that's what we have right now, Jeremy. And as I said, it's uncharted territory, and everyone's just trying to make everything work out as best as it can in a time in which no one saw this chapter coming in this book. So I want to thank the teachers for agreeing to do that, and they've been working diligently. I want to thank them for their flexibility in making sure that this happens.
I have just a quick question following up on the Chromebooks you were saying were going to be available at Hillside. You said there's an email going out. Could you reiterate how people know if they're on that list to pick up a Chromebook or when they go? That will come in an email? Or?
There's a block of time, and so Amy and John and Christian are managing that. So parents already have a list of parents who've requested. So within that time frame, if the parent can't get there, we'll make sure that the Chromebook is some other arrangement is made to get that in the hands of the children.
Okay, but they'll receive email word is what you're saying about the pickup.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, yeah. They will be notified. If a blast may have already gone out, an email blast may have already gone out, but the communication has taken place. And as I said, the plan was to be able to distribute them, starting today, but that had to be moved to tomorrow. But the Chromebooks will get into the hands of children by Wednesday, which is the date that we're committed to actually starting the online work in Google Classroom.
Okay. Yeah,
I also wanted to add that, so there's the how-to that went out so that families are familiar with how to support children to access. They at Hillside also sent out individual codes for each student, and then another email will be going out on the heels of this meeting, likely tomorrow morning, around some Google codes that the entire school can access around special area, instruction and lots of different resources in other areas as well.
Okay.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the MOA under 4B?
So
So
moved.
moved.
Is that Jeremy and Lauren?
Yes.
Okay, for some reason, I only get like 6 picture boxes in front of me. I didn't figure out about GoToMeeting, so as long as Janine, you can see everyone. It sounds like Jeremy moved and Lauren seconded.
Yes.
Do I have, so all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, did you get that, Janine? Was that a yes?
Janine, you're muted.
Tim, were
Yeah.
you yes?
Tim, you were yes? Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Great. So 4C, placement for services, CSC and CPSC. Anyone have any questions? Do I have a motion to approve these placements? Services?
So moved.
Allison, a second?
Second.
A second.
Lauren? Okay.
Okay, all in favor?
Okay, unanimous.
Okay, great. Personnel, does anybody have any questions under 5A through D? Okay, do I have a motion to approve 5A through D personnel?
So moved.
So
Sylvia.
Sylvia. Mhm.
And a second?
Second.
Allison?
Okay, Allison, take your pick.
Okay.
Okay, all in favor?
Okay, all in favor? Mhm.
You got that?
Yes.
All right, okay. Approval of minutes from March 2nd. Does anybody have any questions or comments about the minutes from March 2nd? You do have a motion to approve the minutes from March 2nd.
So moved.
Tim?
And a second?
Second. Sylvia.
Sylvia.
Sylvia? Okay, all in favor?
Okay.
Okay, policy report. Lauren?
There's just the minutes from the January 28th meeting. I just gave an overview of various topics we discussed, but at this point, there's no new policy that needs to be discussed among the board.
Okay. Thank you for that. The CropC MOA. Valerie, do you want to, I can't remember if we actually spoke about this or not, but do you want to just?
Sure. Yeah, at the last board meeting, we discussed the use of the Jasper Cropsey painting representing the Hudson Valley that hangs in the Hudson Valley Museum, and a group that's tasked with creating an app for the Port Authority bridges and tunnels wants to use that an image of that painting in the app when it comes to Hastings. So it's the river town. So every river town was asked to do this. So that this particular Cropsey painting represents Hastings. So they want to use the image to add to their app. And in order to do that, the board has to, through this resolution and some adjustments made by legal counsel in the actual agreement, decide to grant permission to do this. At our last board meeting, there was certainly indication that the board would be amicable and willing to allow this group to use the image of the Cropsey painting.
What was the change? Was it Will that worked on this that he
Will
made?
worked on this, and he thought it was, it didn't specify enough of, what, that the painting and the image and any other use thereafter still had to be granted through the permission of the Board of Education. So it was used for this particular purpose only and not, in perpetuity in some other type of part of this.
Mobile application. Okay. Just one question about that. Is there a time limit for how long they can use it? That's one.
I don't think it was a time limit as much as it was one, it was for this specified purpose. And I don't think that there was it was for the year, but, for this particular travel story GPS, that this image will come up as the, when you use this app, and I guess you're clicking through the various towns, and when you click on Hastings, it's going to be the Jasper Cropsey painting.
Okay. Seems
You need a
innocuous.
motion? You need to take a vote on it, Doug?
No, I know. It's just, does anyone have any questions about it before we do that? No. Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the Cropsey MOA?
So moved. Sylvia?
Okay, a second?
Second.
A second.
I'll do Sylvia and Jeremy.
Okay.
Fine.
All in favor?
Okay, unanimous.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Yeah, that'll be interesting to see the app.
Yeah, it will be.
So no second public comment. We'll read comment. Does the Board of Ed have any comments?
I just want to thank Valerie and Melissa and Maureen and our entire administrative staff and the flexibility of our teaching staff through this really unprecedented time in our own community and just in the New York region and our country. So I want to thank you for our leadership and for continuing to communicate all the rapidly changing events that are happening before us.
Thank you.
You're here.
Just seconding that, Lauren, thank you for saying that. A lot of work and a lot of uncertainty, so we appreciate it. And we appreciate all the community support too for those organizations that have stepped up to help with children who are in need right now.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Thank you for those comments. Do you have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Jeremy? Okay, thank you. Okay, all in favor?
Okay.
Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Successful first go to meeting.
Thank you, Janine, for all of your work. Thank you, Maureen. I know you.
Thank you, Janine. Yeah.
Everyone. Thank you. Good night.
Okay. Good night.